Your child just came home crying, someone bullied them at school, and you say 4 simple words, just ignore them, okay? In that moment, you think you're helping, you think you're toughening them up. But what you've actually done is teach your child that their pain doesn't matter, that their feelings are an inconvenience. And 20 years from now, they'll be sitting in a therapist's office trying to figure out why they can't express emotions or ask for help. Today, we're exposing the dark psychology of parenting, the small, everyday things loving parents do that silently destroy their children's mental health. And before you think this doesn't apply to you, stick around, because the most damaging behaviors are the ones we don't even realize we're doing. Let's start with something almost every parent has done: comparison. Why can't you be more like your sister? She never gives me this much trouble. Look at your cousin, straight A's. What's your excuse? When I was your age, I was already working and helping my family. Here's what happens in your child's brain when you say these things. They hear you are not enough. As you are right now, you are a disappointment. Every comparison becomes a brick in a wall between who they are and who they think they need to be to earn your love. They start believing that love isn't given freely. It's something they must earn by being someone else. Fast forward 15 years. That child is now an adult who compares themselves to everyone around them. They scroll through social media feeling worthless. They sabotage their own success because deep down, they believe they don't measure up. They choose partners who criticize them because that's what love felt like growing up.
The tragedy? You were probably compared to others as a child too, and you're just passing down what was done to you.
Now let's talk about something even more common: emotional dismissal. Your child is scared of the dark. You say, "Don't be silly, there's nothing to be afraid of." They're anxious about a test. You tell them, "You're overreacting, it's just a test." They're heartbroken over a friendship. You minimize it. "You'll forget about this in a week." Here's the problem: when you dismiss their emotions, you're teaching them that their inner experience is wrong, that what they feel cannot be trusted, that they're being too sensitive or dramatic for having human emotions. This creates adults who disconnect from their feelings entirely. They can't identify what they're feeling because they learned early on that feelings don't matter. They develop anxiety because emotions they've been suppressing for decades are screaming to be heard. They struggle in relationships because they never learned that it's safe to be vulnerable. Think about it like this. Imagine telling a plant stop needing water every day. Eventually that plant withers. Emotions are the same. They're signals telling us what we need. When children learn to ignore these signals, they lose touch with themselves. Here's one of the most damaging patterns of all: making love conditional on achievement. "I'm so proud of you" when they bring home good grades, complete silence when they don't, hugs and celebration when they win the game, disappointment and coldness when they lose. Your child's developing brain doesn't understand nuance. What they learn is simple: when I achieve, I am lovable. When I fail, I am not. This creates adults who are terrified of failure. They're perfectionists who work themselves into burnout. They panic at the thought of making mistakes. They tie their entire self-worth to external achievements: the promotion, the degree, the perfect body the social media likes. And here's the cruelest twist: no matter how much they achieve, they never feel good enough. Because the love they're chasing isn't really about achievement. It's about the unconditional acceptance they never received as a child. The parent usually means well. They think they're motivating their child. But motivation says, "I believe in you regardless of the outcome." Conditional love says, "You're only valuable when you succeed." Let's expose another toxic pattern: using guilt to control behavior. "After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you treat me? You're going to give me a heart attack with all this stress you cause. I gave up my dreams so you could have a better life, and you can't even do this one thing for me?" This is psychological manipulation disguised as parenting. You're teaching your child that they are responsible for your emotional state, that their job is to manage your feelings, that their natural desire for independence is an act of betrayal. These children become adults who can't set boundaries. They say yes when they mean no. They stay in toxic relationships because leaving would mean hurting someone. They sacrifice their own needs constantly because they learn that other people's feelings are always more important than their own. They also carry crushing guilt for simply existing. They feel guilty for being happy when others aren't, guilty for having needs, guilty for taking up space in the world, and the cycle continues because they often become parents who guilt their own children. Here's a subtle but devastating one: gaslighting your child's experience. Your child says, "You hurt my feelings when you yelled at me." You respond, "I didn't yell. You're being too sensitive." They remember something that happened. You insist, "That never happened. You're making things up." They express pain. You counter, "It wasn't that bad. You're remembering it wrong." This teaches children to doubt their own perception of reality. They learn that what they experienced, what they felt, what they remember, none of it can be trusted. That the authority figure's version of events is the only truth. These become adults with severe self-doubt. They second-guess every decision. They stay in harmful situations because they can't trust their own judgment that something is wrong. They're easily manipulated by others because they learned early that their reality doesn't matter. In relationships, they constantly apologize even when they've done nothing wrong. They struggle to advocate for themselves because they don't trust that their experience is valid. Now let's talk about the silent treatment, the cold shoulder, the withdrawal of affection. Your child misbehaves, and instead of addressing it, you shut down. You stop talking to them. You withdraw your warmth. You become emotionally unavailable until they learn their lesson. For a child, a parent's love is their entire world. It's their safety, their security, their proof that they matter. When you withdraw that love, even temporarily, you're sending a terrifying message. My love for you can disappear. You are only safe when I approve of you. This creates adults with abandonment issues. They panic when someone seems distant. They become clingy or conversely, push people away before they can be left. They struggle with something called object permanence in relationships. They can't believe someone still loves them when that person isn't physically present or actively showing affection. They also become people pleasers, terrified of conflict because conflict once meant love was taken away. Here's one many people don't recognize as harmful: treating your child like your therapist, complaining about your marriage to your 10-year-old, venting about financial stress and making them worry about bills, sharing your depression, your loneliness, your regrets, treating them like your emotional support system. Children need to be children. They need to feel safe and protected. When you burden them with adult problems, you're forcing them to grow up too fast. You're stealing their innocence and making them responsible for your emotional well-being. This creates a dynamic called parentification. The child becomes the parent. They learn to suppress their own needs to take care of yours. They become hypervigilant, always scanning for danger, always trying to manage your moods. As adults, they often end up in caretaker roles. They date emotionally unavailable people they try to fix. They attract narcissists who drain them. They neglect themselves completely because they never learned that their needs matter too, and they feel guilty for having problems because they think their job is to solve everyone else's problems, never to have their own. This connects to another toxic pattern, making your child responsible for your happiness. You're the only reason I keep going. If it weren't for you, I'd have nothing to live for. Seeing you succeed is the only thing that makes me happy. This sounds loving. It sounds like devotion, but it's actually a tremendous burden. You're telling your child that your entire emotional well-being rests on their shoulders, that if they fail, disappoint you, or simply live their own life, you'll fall apart. These children become adults who can't pursue their own dreams. They choose careers their parents want, not what they want. They stay close to home out of obligation, not desire. They shape their entire life around making others happy. They also struggle with their own identity because they've spent their whole life being someone else's reason for living. They don't know who they are outside of what they do for others. And perhaps most sadly, they often end up resentful of the sacrifice they're expected to make, but unable to express that resentment because it would make them a bad person. Let's address the difference between correcting behavior and attacking character. You didn't clean your room is about behavior. You're so lazy and irresponsible is about character. That was unkind addresses an action. You're a mean, selfish person attacks their identity. When you criticize who your child is rather than what they did, you're shaping how they see themselves. They internalize your labels. If you call them lazy, they believe they are lazy at their core. If you call them stupid, careless, worthless, those words become their inner voice. These children become adults with brutal internal critics. They speak to themselves with the same harshness they heard growing up. They engage in negative self-talk that destroys their confidence. They fulfill the prophecies spoken over them because they believe that's who they are. And here's the heartbreak. They often can't hear compliments or accept love because those negative beliefs are so deeply rooted. Someone tells them they're wonderful, and their brain immediately rejects it because it contradicts the core belief established in childhood. Now let's talk about broken promises. We'll go to the park this weekend, I promise. Weekend comes, you're too tired, no explanation, no apology. I'll be at your game, you don't show up. Again. I'll spend more time with you soon. Soon never comes. Each broken promise teaches your child that they can't rely on you, that promises are meaningless, that what matters to them doesn't really matter, that they're not important enough to prioritize. These become adults with trust issues. They struggle to believe people when they make commitments. They protect themselves by never getting too close or never expecting anything from anyone. They either become people who break promises themselves or people who are devastated when others do because reopens that childhood wound. They also often struggle with hope itself. They stop dreaming, stop planning, stop believing good things will happen because in their experience, good things were always promised but never delivered. And here's one that damages multiple children at once: favoritism. One child can do no wrong, the other can do no right. One child is the golden child, praised, celebrated, given opportunities. The other is the scapegoat, blamed, criticized, held to impossible standards. Both children are harmed by this, just in different ways. The scapegoat grows up believing they're fundamentally flawed. They carry shame like a second skin. They often become overachievers, desperately trying to finally be good enough, or they completely give up thinking, why bother? I'll never measure up anyway. The golden child, meanwhile, develops a fragile ego dependent on external validation. They panic when they're not the best. They struggle with genuine self-esteem because their worth was always based on comparison. And they often have difficulty forming authentic relationships because they learned that love is about being superior to others. The sibling relationship is also poisoned. Instead of allies, they become competitors. This rivalry often lasts their entire lives, preventing them from having the supportive relationship siblings should provide. So what does all of this add up to? Adults with anxiety that seems to come from nowhere, depression that they can't quite explain, relationship patterns they can't seem to break, a persistent feeling that something is wrong with them, low self-worth despite external success, difficulty regulating emotions, fear of abandonment, perfectionism and fear of failure, people-pleasing at the expense of their own needs, difficulty setting boundaries. The list goes on, and here's what makes this all so insidious. Most parents who do these things are not intentionally trying to harm their children. They're often repeating patterns from their own childhood. They're stressed, overwhelmed, doing their best with limited tools and understanding. But good intentions don't erase the impact. A child who's hurt is hurt, regardless of whether the parent meant to cause harm. And unless these patterns are recognized and interrupted, They continue from generation to generation. So how do we break the cycle? First, awareness. You can't change what you don't see. If you recognize yourself in any of these patterns, that's actually good news. Awareness is the first step toward change. Second, apologize. If you've done these things to your children, it's never too late to acknowledge it. A genuine apology. I'm sorry I compared you to your sibling. That was unfair and hurtful. Can be incredibly healing. It teaches children that adults can make mistakes and take responsibility. Third, learn different tools. Most parents harm their children simply because they don't know better alternatives. You can learn to validate emotions instead of dismissing them, to offer unconditional love instead of conditional approval, to set boundaries without using guilt or withdrawal. Fourth, do your own healing work. You can't give what you don't have. If you never received unconditional love, it's hard to give it. If you never learned emotional regulation, it's hard to teach it. Healing yourself heals the next generation. Fifth, break the silence. Talk about mental health in your family. Normalize therapy. Create space for everyone to be imperfectly human without shame. And if you were not a parent but you're watching this and recognizing your own childhood, know this: what happened to you wasn't your fault. Your feelings are valid, your pain is real, and healing is possible. Here's the truth that nobody wants to hear but everyone needs to understand. The parents who damage their children the most are often the ones who love them the most. This isn't about villainizing parents. This is about recognizing that love alone isn't enough. We need awareness. We need to break generational patterns. We need to do better. If you're a parent watching this feeling guilty, good. Guilt that leads to change is healthy. Guilt that leads to growth protects your children. Use that fee. Ling to become the parent your child needs. And if you're someone healing from your own childhood, remember this: you didn't get to choose how you were raised, but you do get to choose what you do with that pain. You can let it define you, or you can let it refine you. You can pass it down, or you can break the chain. The cycle ends with awareness. The healing begins with truth, and the change starts with you. You're not broken. You're not too damaged. You're not too far gone. You're simply human, carrying wounds that were never your fault, but are now your responsibility to heal. And that's not a burden. That's your power. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, understanding the problem is the first step towards solving it. You've got this.